Hey there, welcome back. This is Chapter 4, Infancy and Toddlerhood, Part 1. So, the first month. It used to be thought that infants were kind of that blank slate, the tabula rasa, whatever you call it. That they really didn't do things. They were very simple, very reactionary. Things were based mostly on reflex. But what we're finding is that infants are actually capable of more complex thought than we originally had noticed. Some of the states of arousal for infants. Waking activity. This is just where they are awake and they're engaged in something. So either looking at a mobile or looking at one of their parents, something like that. Another state of arousal is crying. This is, how they let you know that they don't like something that's going on. Some infants' cries are worse than others. Our youngest son, when he cried, he had this very, very high-pitched screech that would come along with it, and boy, just made you grit your teeth. It was horrible. Luckily, he has grown out of that. Alert inactivity. This is where they are awake, possibly looking around, but not really engaged in anything. Drowsiness is a wonderful state. It's where they're getting ready to go to sleep. Their eyes may close a little bit. Regular sleep and irregular sleep. Let me tell you, any type of sleep is great. Regular sleep is just where they're resting normally. Not a lot of movement. Irregular sleep is where they might wake up a little bit and go back to sleep, or they stir a lot. Yeah, it's cool when they're awake, but it's pretty nice when they're asleep too. It gives you some relaxation time. It can take a while for babies really to learn to sleep through the night. Really just kind of depends on the temperament of the baby. Our oldest son would never sleep through the night. Boy, probably took him almost a year before he was able to finally sleep through the night. We have friends that just adopted a baby and their son has slept through the night from day one. So it's it really depends on the child, the temperament of the child. It's good, I think, as parents to kind of figure out a schedule. For my wife and I, we discovered that it was best if I just stay up till 2, 3 in the morning for the last feeding, then put the baby down, and then my wife would get up a few hours later with the morning feeding. And that worked best for us. When I get woken up at night, apparently I'm not a good-natured individual. I am told. So I really don't remember a lot of times when I do get woken up. So that worked best for us. It's good for parents just to be able to figure that out and what's going to be able to work best for them so they can survive, because sleep deprivation is not fun. So babies are able to be classically conditioned. Apparently, if you think of Pavlov, if you ring a bell before you feed a baby, as soon as you start ringing the bell, their mouth is going to water. I don't know why you would want to do that, but I guess it's good to keep in mind some things like that. So, if you can catch their diaper being dirty or wet prior to their crying, then, they can come up with a new sign to let you know so they don't have to go through the crying. I don't know. Habituation is basically when babies get bored. It's when they see the same stimulus over and over or experience the same stimulus over and over. They get used to that and they don't pay attention to it too much. This is probably one of those areas. I don't know why we wouldn't assume that babies get bored also. We certainly get habituated to things and get bored. So kind of makes sense that babies would as well. All right, so some of their physical and motor development. Within the first 4 months, their body weight doubles. Definitely like to see that weight increase within the first 4 months. Initially, there may be a little bit of weight loss, but that shouldn't last for more than a week or two before we like to see the weight start gaining. Their permanent hair comes in, unless you're our kids. Your hair really doesn't start coming in until about 6 to 9 months. We had very bald babies. Their eyes start to focus on things, and they also start to smile around 4 months. Before that, when parents think that they smile, it's usually just gas. So after if they smile 2-3 months old, be prepared. There's probably going to be a fart or a messy diaper that you're going to have to clean up. First teeth may start coming in around 4 months. Again, that can be anywhere from probably 4 to 9 months. All of our kids were actually very slow in getting their teeth as well, which makes the point that with all of these things in terms of development, these are just general guidelines. Individual may be earlier or later than these things. If it's too late, there would be cause for concern, but really, we have to be realistic and recognize that every baby's different. And then finally, around this time too, self-discovery. So they'll start recognizing that, hey, this is my hand and I can do whatever I want to with it. And that self-discovery actually is important in terms of this next stage, where they start developing their motor skills. So the fine motor skills is reaching and grasping. So they're able to aim now their hand to reach out and grab something. Before we talked about the palmar reflex, where if you put something in a baby's palm, their hand will automatically close on it. Well, they start getting control over that with these fine motor skills. Their gross motor skills include rolling, crawling, standing, and walking with assistance, and generally standing with assistance as well. So they might be able to pull themselves up on the chair, couch, coffee table, or something, and then some. The parent will hold their fingers, and they can start to walk. And again, that is another general thing. Our oldest son never crawled. He devised this method of transportation where he would sit on his butt, and he would kind of lean forward and move his legs back and forth at the knees, and that would kind of propel him forward. One time we were at church, and I had him out in the foyer, and he was doing his little thing across the floor, and an older gentleman walked up really concerned and said, "Oh, doesn't he crawl?" I'm like, "No, he just created this way of doing it." And the guy's like, "Well, you really need to teach him to crawl, or he's not going to be able to read." And I'm like, "What?" That makes no sense whatsoever. He's like, "Yeah, I went to this speed reading seminar, and the first thing that the guy had us do was get down and crawl on the floor. And he told us that this was going to help, develop our reading skills." And I was thinking to myself, I don't think he was doing that for your benefit. I think he was doing that for his entertainment, watching all of you guys crawl around on the floor. So he never crawled. He just went from that little monkey maneuver to walking, and he's doing just fine. He actually reads above grade level. Is a smart kid, 4.0 student going into a senior year. So really the skipping, crawling never really had any effect on him. He actually didn't like rolling either. He actually hated being on his stomach, which is probably part of why he never really crawled. But around this time, he did learn to sit up by himself. So that happens around 5 to 8 months, where they're able to develop those muscles in the abdomen and back that allow them to be able to sit up by themselves. So that takes place around the 5 to 8 month period. Let's move on to 9 to 12 months. So around this time, they should weigh about 3 times their birth weight. When you take them in for their well checkups, the doctors have a nice little graph and chart to put the baby into percentile. Again, this is just ballpark figures. I've never really seen a doctor get too concerned about these percentiles. Most of our kids were under percentile, both in weight and height, and physically they're doing just fine. Around 9 to 12 months, they can stand alone. And when they start standing alone is when they will also walk. I remember our youngest daughter, she was actually about 18 months old before she gave up gave up crawling in favor of walking. And I actually remember her first steps. She was, trying to stand up. She had this scared look on her face, but a smile as well, like it was kind of exhilarating. And she finally took a couple of steps, and from there on, she was a lot more mobile than before. The cognitive development is also associated with mobility. So they tend to want to go somewhere, by walking, crawling, whatever, in order to get something. So either to go to a parent or to get a toy that they want to play with, which is another thing that starts to develop around 9 to 12 years old, 9 to 12 months old. Around a month, they can start manipulating their environment, meaning they can put things where they want them, and recognize that they have that type of control over their environment. Physical and motor development, 13 to 18 months. The weight gain starts to slow around 18 months. Most should be walking, and their fine motor skills really develop. So they can start doing more complex things. We had a little toy that had some curved sticks going up it, for lack of a better word, that were pretty thick, and there were some thick beads that were in the shapes of triangles, stars, circles, squares, and the goal was to develop those fine motor skills enough to be able to put that bead onto that stick, by the time of 13 to 18 months, they're able to do those sorts of things. 19 to 24 months, again, they should be walking pretty well at this point. Pretty good as far as motor skills go. They can get themselves dressed and undressed, so they can handle snaps and buttons and things like that. They want to be able to explore, and they can start categorizing things. By this I mean that toy I was referring to earlier, each stick was a different color, and each bead was a different color that would match the stick. And at that point, they should be able to, put the beads on the right color, organize them by color, or they also had the option of organizing them by shape. And around 19 to 24 months, they should start be able to categorizing things in that manner. Senses, visual perception, mirror neurons. This is something that we're actually learning about. It's a relatively new discovery. We have parts of our brain that mirror other people or other things. We actually discovered this first in monkeys, and then we discovered that humans have it as well. So what happens is if a baby or an infant toddler is watching somebody do something, neurons within their brain will fire similar to as if they were doing it themselves. And this type of behavior helps infants to be able to repeat and mimic and copy the things that they see people around them doing. And so it's a huge advantage in terms of learning. So it's basically imitating. Young infants show some signs of depth perception, but it really doesn't improve much until 4 months. And so, being able to see, this is a drop off, I need to be careful, doesn't really happen until about 4 months, and probably even longer, to where they're able to be a lot more mobile other than just rolling around on the floor. They're very attentive to human speech, so it's definitely good for people to, parents, caregivers, to be able to talk to infants, because they definitely attune to that, and it starts that development in terms of their vocabulary and being able to talk. And then, hey, surprise, surprise, infants can tell the difference between tastes and smells. Again, infants are people. I don't know why this is such a surprising finding. So, they're going to have their preferences. Some things they're going to like the taste of, some things they're not going to like the taste of. Personally, I really enjoy the taste of banana baby food. I think it's absolutely amazing. I also love the rice cereal mush baby mush that they have as well. I still think those are fantastic. And sometimes when I'm in the grocery store, I will swing by the baby aisle and pick myself up a little snack, a little treat. But some things, they don't really like. If you've ever smelt some baby food, some of it is absolutely nasty. And I do not blame babies for not wanting it into their mouth. Parents learn pretty quickly what their infants prefer and what they do not prefer. And so it's based on their sense of smell and taste. So Piaget looked at the stages of sensory motor development, so how their senses and their motor skills develop through infancy and toddlerhood. So 0 to 1 month are the early reflexes that we talked about earlier, the palmar reflex. There's actually another reflex which I think is kind of torturous, but if you take an infant and you run your finger on their foot from their heel to their toes, when you get up to their toes, the toes will curl around your finger. That's a reflex. If you tried doing that on an adult, you'd probably get kicked instead of their toes wrapping around your finger. So adaptation of early reflexes. So this is where the reflexes become more intentional. So particularly, again, using the palmar reflex as an example, around this stage, they are going to be reaching out and grabbing on something. And so that palmar reflex then becomes more controlled to where now, as adults, if, something goes into our palm, we basically choose whether or not we're going to wrap our fingers around it. Stage 3, 4 to 8 months, experience desire before graduation and object permanence develops. And basically what object permanence means, before they reach this stage, you can take like their favorite toy and put a blanket over it, and to them it is just dropped out of existence. Object permanence, when they hit that stage, it means that they know that the object is still under the blanket, and all they have to do is move it, and the object will be there before them again. Stage 4, they start to apply old behaviors to new situations, and object permanence happens sometime within this 8 to 12 month period. So they realize that if they reach out to get a toy, they can also reach out to get a spoon. So they have this old behavior that they've learned. They can now apply it into novel situations that they haven't been in before. Stage 5, invention of new behaviors. They start to explore what they can do versus trial and error. And we'll talk a lot about this throughout the course, but attachment definitely has a huge role in this with their caregivers. That the child should feel confident enough that they can, make mistakes and learn in that manner, which is going to help their overall development. And then stage 6, internal representation of the external world. They can start to picture scenes and things within their brain, within their mind, and they can start thinking about these things as well. So they're not as concrete. They're starting to move into more abstract levels. It's not a huge step into abstraction. Everything is still very concrete, but they're able to at least get a mental representation of their world around them, of their situation around them. Language development also starts within this time period. So they can start with single words that can have different meanings depending on the environment. So they might have the same word for, the same word for different items. So, a cow and a dog might both be a dog, or a cat and a dog might both be a dog or a cat. So they're using the same same language. Some I was when I was a kid, I made up my own words that my parents always got a kick out of. So I guess that I used to call watermelons wada wada minimo. I don't know why. It would be easier just to say watermelon, but that was my word. For helicopter, I guess it was an ot diddley-o. So, kids can make up their own words for things. My oldest son, I still give him a hard time about this. He had a hard time saying flag, and it always came out as if he were saying the F-bomb. And so I would always get a kick whenever we would drive past a church or a school when the American flag was flying, and I would always say, "Hey, what's that?" And he'd always drop the F-bomb. I thought it was funny. My wife, not so much. Around 21 months really is where their language really takes off. They start learning a lot of new words, new vocabulary, are able to put it together into sentences. And a lot of this really is based on the work of Noam Chomsky, who really did a lot of research on language development. One of the interesting things is when you look at kids who are bilingual or know more than one or two languages, this is really the time to do it when they're young. The younger, the better, so that they're able to develop those language skills in different languages. And there's really not a lot of confusion between the two children as well. I've known several people who have grown up bilingual, and they're really able to keep the language separate and are able to be very articulate in both. So that is the end of Chapter 4, Infant and Toddlerhood, at least Part 1. Until next time.